Welcome back to the Batman's revisitation of the Twilight 2000 game system, circa the mid-80s, early 90s. This particular module was copyright 1990. Survivor's Guide to the United Kingdom. Nice little $7 price tag. How far back how prices have changed. Okay. Up to this point, pretty much everything I reviewed other than the core book are modules, game modules. This is a number of what's called source books. These they're not a pre-written game adventure or series of game adventures, although they have some ideas for game adventures in the back. This is an information book for the GM specifically, but also for the players if they're interested to know what's going on in the larger sphere of things. Also, if you had a member of your player characters who are representing the UK or are a former member of the UK military establishment or what have you, this would give us some good background information as to what unit they may belong to, where it was, blah, blah. So when we look at what we got here, development notes on the maps, what the future holds for Europe or for the United Kingdom. And it says here, much of what happens to the characters depends on how and when they arrive in the United Kingdom. Chapter outlines the possibilities, including several connected previous Twilight 2000 modules, i.e. going home. So in the previous module that I'd reviewed, perhaps they managed to just miss the boat and get over to cross the channel and ended up in England, or they purposely missed the boat, the task force, which then led them to finding an alternative method of getting home, which would include a stop in the UK, or perhaps they're still active part of the military establishment and are being temporarily based there. There's also the Boomer series where the submarine adventures may or may not see them getting either left on the UK shores or the ship making a tour there, stop there. And then we have something called Accidental Tourists. It says several previous adventures arisen where the characters had access to a boat and somehow or another found themselves in Europe or in England after the adventure. It talks about sailing from Scandinavian Peninsula, from Denmark, Holland, or from Spain or France, intentional landfall, assuming they purposely come to the UK. Then some details. So we got a nice map of major nuclear strikes in the UK, and as you would expect, most of the major cities and industrial locations have been hammered pretty hard. We have the backstory for the British Empire or its constituents, specifically dealing with Europe, the war itself, our standpoint before 1987 and 87 to 1995. So the structure of the British Army remains basically unchanged. BOR, or the British are this is the acronym for the British contingent in Europe, and it's in here somewhere. I know what it was, I read it anyway. Although it's not full strength in 95 in Northern Ireland, troubles continued. This really showed no signs of ending when the Army's few structural changes occurred in the Far East. Pending return to Hong Kong and China in 96, when several Gurkha battalions would have to be redeployed, blah, blah, blah. 96, the West German invasion of East Germany took place, and the British involvement as part of NATO. First British troops crossing inter-German frontier on 9 December, led by the 1st Armored Division. They had reached the outskirts of Berlin by Christmas Eve. First Corps was ordered to retake the city and relieve NATO forces holding out there. During a week of bare street fighting, the British forces showed their superiority in close combat fighting and slowly forced back the Soviet defenders. And we continue on with other issues of that year, 1999, 2000, current year. Talk about land. Okay. After having read it, the gist here is in England is we have a major breakdown in both social and political order. The devastation of probably 3/4 of the population has caused significant strain, and that prior to the war, the British, England itself was a major industrial power with very little of its manpower devoted towards agriculture. It roughly stated about 2% of the population fed the majority. And after the war broke out in the following years, this saw a radical change. Up to 25% of the surviving population was either forced by situation or various entities of what passes for government to take up the shovel and the hoe and become farmers, much to some of their discontent. But people need to be fed. The various entities in England have seen a fracture, the country fracture along its cultural and geopolitical lines in a lot of ways. Her Majesty's, quote, His Majesty's government, because Queen Elizabeth stepped down as she retired at the beginning of this conflict to allow her son, King Charles, to step up and take over, is in charge of southern England with the assistance of the British military. A lot of the midsections, Welsh and Ireland, are independent to some degree. There's a lot of independent cities as well. And then there's sort of, go up in the north, you got sections for the Celts and the Scots, and various divisions of the Scots who are now independent or declared independence, with the British monarchy and military still working to make or convince or force these individual groups to understand or come to the conclusion that it's better for everybody to remain united or to reunite and under a common banner than to be independent and individually taken out. So that's just a nutshell. It said in 2000, British forces spent little time on the offensive, and Persian Gulf forces from the MEF spent a year in a number of anti-marauder campaigns. July, it was sent to Chabahar when the Soviets attacked, arrived too late to participate in the fighting. Germany, a second corps, was designed to follow up on force for the NATO attack into Poland, Operation Ancient Mariner, that ended up fighting a Soviet counterattack in July. The corps did a commendable job, and as the autumnal rains began to fall, it was withdrawn to its encampment area. The rest of the Boer was involved in anti-marauder duties during the summer. The British remaining troops, mostly territorial army units, maintained martial law over southern England. Towards the end of the year, the army organized elections, which led to the re-establishment of a civilian government in southern England. Elsewhere in Britain, the situation has stabilized over the past 18 months. Established groups now hold control over much of the country, and the power is split between a dozen kingdoms. This had led to a reduction in the number of marauder groups operating. Each region wanted to or needed to expand to make itself the dominant power in Britain. By the end of the year, 2 divisions had returned from Germany. This helped the government immensely, as personnel from the territorial units could be absorbed into regular organizations or moved into other vitally needed occupations, such as agriculture or reconstruction. The year began in Ireland with a surprise offensive by the Irish, conducted in the middle of the worst winter seen in Ireland for many years. It took the UDR totally by surprise. Other hampered the Irish as the offensive continued, but by then it accomplished its goal. Blah, blah, blah. The chief problem faced by the British government is to do away with the bans of marauders and bandits wandering the countryside, and convince the various independent towns and cities in Britain that the government can govern themselves better than they can govern better than they can govern themselves. The next couple of years will be crucial. Talks about the history of the land, the geography of Britain, a nice map of the northern part of the British Isles. Talks about national government, people, The economy is still functioning to some degree. The war produced some dramatic changes to the country. Some 25 million people were killed in the nuclear exchanges, while another 10 million died during the fighting, disease, and starvation caused by the harsh winters of 97-98, as well as the lack of medical care after the nuclear exchange. At the turn of the century, approximately 20 million people are left in Britain. Most of the industry is destroyed, along with the local government structure. Quasi-feudal kingdoms sprung up dominated by warlords, so on and so forth. So we see a breakdown of political military factions. In the north, you have the SAP, or the SNP, John Campbell's Wildcats and Highland Warriors. You see the Royal Army of Scotland, the Celt Rangers, and the New Jacobites. Harridan's Army, Red Devils, Scottish Union faction, the Chainmail Warriors, and the Central Midlands. And you see Baby Squad, the New Order, the Sherwood Rangers, Gilmore's Gladiators, Dave Hughes Marauders, Bandito Yankee, Crofts Raiders. And you have the Welsh Voluntary National Army. In the south, you see the Duchy of Cornwall, the Soviet Group Forces of England, Cornwall Liberation Front, Pirates of Penzance, Braves Bandits, and then the British Army. So you can see there's quite a bit going on here for the players to get involved in, and or just in general to see how messed up things have gotten in the UK. And here's the map: Southern Ireland, Southern UK. You can see pretty much the entire London area has been pulverized, as well as the Liverpool, the Bury, Bolton, Stock. Pretty much most of these major places have been hammered by nukes. Life in Great Britain, living conditions, housing, money, when it's still used, it's still based off the pound, health and medication, work and wages, social life, distribution, prices. Basically, there is a functioning world here. People are surviving. They have their issues. They don't have quite the same issues as the Europeans do, especially in Poland and Eastern Europe and sections of Germany, where you've got the Warsaw Pact and the NATO fighting each other. In England, you have a lot of more smaller territorial or regional forces battling each other for control. Services, weaponry, what's left of the North Sea oil fields, and how their play on the effect of who's in charge and supporting the government. And we got a regional guide, specifically the Highlands, Central Scotland, the Shetland Islands, Orkneys, Anglo-Scottish border, Anglia, Midlands, Wales, Southwest England, Southern England, the Bristol Channel. So let's just take an example of this. Southwest England is a hilly pastoral farming area, lightly populated. The region has little waves, major industry, and survived on a flourishing tourist trade. Since the war, all that has changed. The area is now ruled by the feudal-based Duchy of Cornwall under the watchful eye of Duke Malcolm Briggs. His lieutenants govern the individual cities in his name. The overall command is in his hands. Life under his regime is tough and brutal. Civil rights are unknown. The inhabitants being treated as slaves. Their only goal in life is serving the divinely appointed monarchy. Oppression and suppression is the common facets of life. Naturally, many resisted at first. Brutal action soon stopped such resistance, and now people live in constant fear. Only a few continue to resist under the banner of Cornwall Liberation Front. They are hampered by the size of the Duke's forces and by their lack of equipment and training. The area also holds a dubious claim to fame. It is the home of the only Soviet forces that have conquered any part of Britain. St. Ursula is inhabited and jointly ruled by the 700-strong Soviet group of forces of England. Many Soviet and other PAC POWs were moved into camps in Britain and North America during the nuclear exchange. The house at a camp in Exmoor woke up to find their camp guards, largely civilians, had fled. Colonel Andrew Zofia took stock of the situation, led his men out of the camp. And for the next year, they laid They led the lives of marauders, found themselves being hunted down by the Duke's forces. Last desperate act to save themselves, they seized control of St. Estelle in a lightning raid. To their surprise, they found themselves treated as heroes who had liberated the city from the Duke. D'Alva, ever pragmatic, decided to relinquish control of the city's civilian population, in exchange for his forces being made the city's official military unit. First, the deal was shakily accepted, where Zerkov, I can't pronounce it, kept a tight grip on his men to keep peace. The deal gradually became accepted on both sides. Now the city jointly ruled and is actively involved in fighting the Duke, even going so far as to give support to the Cornwall Liberation Front. Cities, none, independent towns, St. Austell, marauders, the Cornwall Liberation Front, approximately 250 men, the Pirates of Penzance, roughly 250 men, regional and brave bands, roughly 200 men at Tantoon, nuclear sites, Yaville. Sir Ian Burton is the 54-year-old Prime Minister of Great Britain. Various individuals of note. Southern England is dominated by the powerful forces of Britain, the British Army. The Army's long-term goals to reunite Britain, where it includes the Ireland, and this is unknown. At present, it aims with less ambitious to keep the population fed, secure England from external and internal attack, and proceed with reconstruction and recovery, re-establishing government control over the rest of the island as soon as possible. It should be noted that the civilian government is no puppet. Far from it, the military has handed back all power to the government, now takes its orders from the civilians, even going so far as to allow the withdrawal of martial law. There's a section in here somewhere talked about the monarchy too. The majority of the monarchy survived. A good chunk of them died in a nuclear attack on a headquarters that they were at, but a significant portion, including the king himself, survived and is working with the civilian government of southern England as well as the British military in trying to reestablish control and government over the entire country. What we see, like I said, here's the Prime Minister, here's the head of the intelligence, MI5 or whatever, American-born Richard Rossi. He's head of the DIA. This is the fellow head of the CIA's contingent, the Russian's KGB guy. Lots of potentials for some interesting upper level chicanery. Then we got the organizations from His Majesty's government. Here we go. King Charles III assumed the throne after his mother abdicated in favor in 94, becoming the first British monarch to retire. King survived the war, is currently involved in helping his country combat the ever-increasing chaos which threatened to submerge it. And it goes on, blah, blah, blah. MI5, MI6, the U.S. military's military intelligence organization, the DIA, American Legion. Okay. American Legion was formed during the spring of '98 and drew strength from a number of American personnel from military bases around the UK. At the time, it was headquartered at the High Wycombe, where it helped the locals maintain the town's independence. The British Army moved into the area. The Legion handed over control of the town to the Army and offered services to the military. After that, the Legion participated in another number of operations, helping the Army secure several areas. When the Americans issued their Operation Omega orders in September 2000, provisions were made for the members of the Legion to return home. Just over 3/4 of the unit did. The rest remained in England for a variety of reasons. Structure of the American Legion is organized along standard military lines. Those basic formation tends to be at primary groups, with a number of primary groups making up a platoon. Individual members are assigned to platoons or given support jobs. A small logistics force operates in close contact with its British counterparts. Overall strength is now about some 200 men and women, with nearly 30 primary groups. American Legion is commanded by Colonel Paul Ross, who was formerly in charge of security at an Air Force base in Oxfordshire. CIA, KGB, GRU, the French version of the CIA. Then we can break down to the various regional marauder groups or government groups, depending on whose side you're on. Baby Squad. Baby Squad is a marauder gang operating in the Midlands before the war. It operated in Leicester, but unlike many gangs, it dressed in business suits and used craft knives. When the town became independent, a purge of unknown members was ordered. Some 500 suspected members were exiled. They survived by raiding refugee columns and occasional military convoy. Past year, they've taken up heavy losses in a number of attacks, and the leadership looks intimate. Some of the marauder members of the squad have managed to slip into town to areas where they are not well known and to buy weapons and supplies for the gang with stolen money. The members are experienced at unarmed fighting, and most fights take advantage of this. Our members of the gang take on the most dangerous opponents, while the rest of the gang closes for hand-to-hand fighting. The gang rarely attacks if outnumbered. The structure of the squad is run on typical guerrilla lines. Discipline is low. Morale is quite high despite recent setbacks. Most members use knives or clubs or one sort or another, but some use pistols or rarely larger firearms. That's just an example of the number of these outfits plaguing Britain as a whole. Tartan Army, the New Royalist Army, the Red Devils, Democratic Front for Liberation of England, blah, blah, blah. We got a section on encounters, road encounters, general encounters, town encounters, England encounters, animal encounters, special note. While the war rabies was considered to have been eliminated from the United Kingdom, no cases have been reported in decades, and strict quarantine procedures forced by customs officials. Various ports of entry kept out foreign cases. After 1997, these strict procedures broke down. Since travel was also significantly reduced, chances of contracting rabies and decay remain quite small. Frankly, the author feels that the characters have enough to worry about without bringing in almost 100% fatal diseases into the picture, but the refugees can make their own decisions. Regrettably, plague, cholera, and other such diseases will not be so scarce. That's an interesting side note, right? So we got information for British characters. When you're creating your character, if you want to create a British character, this is where this comes in handy. This would also work for creating somebody wanting to play a character for part of the PC group, even at the beginning. If you had this book handy, you could use this for them to roll up their character. Additions to the equipment list based off of British gear and weapons, vehicles and stuff. Quite a bit of information here. More detailed information of their vehicles, especially some older ones that would likely be found in their militias or their versions of the National Guards or territorial armies, I guess. Stats on those vehicles. Then we have a unit by unit breakdown of the British military forces as of 2000. Order of battle and the unit history and current status of said unit. And here we go. The British Army of the Rhine, i.e. BOR, B-A-O-R. Let's see. All right. First Royal Marine Brigade. The Royal Marines are deployed in Norway on 1st November 96 as part of the Secure Europe Mobile Force. In December 96, unit conducted with the U.S. 4th Marine Amphibious Brigade conducted a blocking operation against the forward spearheads Soviet 18th Army. After clearing the Narvik area, Brigade took part in the Kola Peninsula Offensive. Several of its component units undertook long-range raids against Soviet facilities at Kronstadt and Leningrad. After the NATO offensive stalled in 1997, Royal Marines were withdrawn southward along with the U.S. 4th MAB. The brigade was eventually withdrawn and sent on to other duties, as several of its subcomponents were detached for service in the Norwegian Army, and one regiment, 42nd Commandos, was sent to Iran for service with the MEFF. By 1 January 01, brigade was back in the UK. Its present duties include anti-marauder patrols, oil platform security, special missions for the British government. Subordinate UKLF. Current location, southern UK, North Sea, manpower 400. The Royal Scots Dragoons, a regiment sent to Germany in February 1997, was one of the armored recon regiments of the newly activated Second Corps and fought distinction in every campaign. In 1999, they traded in its remaining AFBs for horses, and then it served as a long-range raiding force, although officially still known as the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. The regiment prefers to use its old designation, the Royal Scots Greys. Subordinate Second Corps, current location, Shetlands, Germany, manpower 300 cavalry. So there you have it. There's examples and breakdown of various entities and situation in the United Kingdom as a whole, and as a player source book. Gives you a lot of good information to be used in the Twilight 2000 campaign and or game system. As an interesting side note, I said, as games go, the rules are fairly light. Its story base is pretty heavy, which is kind of unusual at that time. We're talking the mid-'80s, where a lot of game systems were really heavy in the rules. It was all about the rule sets, and not the story was important, but secondary. The differences is a lot of, up until you start seeing these source books come out, and there's several. This is not by means the only one. There's one here, the RDF source book, and this is dealing with Iran. But the adventures and stuff are pretty much from here to here to here to here, unless your players go off on a tangent. At that point, the GM, of course, is forced to come up, ad-lib, or create content for themselves using what information is available for them. These source books give you much more detailed information for further adventures. So it's possible for a group to get embroiled in helping reunite the various factions of United K into something that's going to be conducive for, playing out their scenario, however you want to play it out. There you have it. So, good set of rules, good game, and I'm looking forward to reviewing additional supplements for the game system itself.